The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base as Staff Sergeant Maria stepped out of the transport vehicle. Dust swirled around her boots as she adjusted the weight of her duffel bag on her shoulder. The other soldiers barely glanced her way as she made her way toward the administrative building. To them, she looked like just another fresh-faced recruit, maybe 25 years old, with nervous energy and uncertain steps. Captain Johnson was waiting for her in his office, a cramped space filled with filing cabinets and military memorabilia. He looked up from his paperwork as she knocked on the open door frame. "I presume," he asked, not bothering to stand. "Yes, sir, reporting for duty as requested." Johnson studied her for a moment. She was small in stature, maybe 5'4", with dark hair pulled back in regulation style. Her uniform was pressed and perfect, but there was something about the way she carried herself that seemed almost too careful, too practiced. "First deployment?" he asked, making an assumption that would prove to be wildly incorrect. Maria hesitated for just a moment. "No, sir, not exactly." "Well, doesn't matter. We need every soldier we can get. You'll be assigned to Alpha Company, 3rd Platoon. Sergeant Williams will show you the ropes." He handed her a folder with her assignment details. "Welcome to Forward Operating Base Thunder. Try to keep your head down and follow orders. This isn't a place for heroes." As Maria left the captain's office, she couldn't help but think about his last comment. If only he knew the truth about who was really standing in front of him. She had learned long ago that sometimes it was better to let people underestimate her. It made things simpler, even if it meant enduring the condescending looks and the assumption that she was green. The barracks were typical military housing, functional, clean, and lacking any personal touches. Her assigned bunk was in a room with 3 other soldiers, all of whom looked like they had been deployed for several months. Their gear was worn, their faces weathered by sun and sand, and they had the easy camaraderie of people who had been through difficult times together. "You must be the newbie," said a tall, lanky soldier with a southern drawl. "Name's Jimmy, but everyone calls me Pete. That's over there." He pointed to a stocky African-American soldier who was cleaning his rifle, and the quiet one reading his. Looked up from his weapon and nodded. "How long you been in?" "Long enough," Maria replied, beginning to unpack her gear. Pete laughed. "Cryptic, I like that. Don't worry, rookie, we'll teach you everything you need to know about staying alive out here. First rule, always check your gear twice. Second rule, trust your team. Third rule, when Sergeant Williams tells you to do something, you do it without question." As if summoned by his name, Sergeant Williams appeared in the doorway. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with graying hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Unlike the captain, Williams actually looked at Maria when he spoke to her. "I'm Williams. Grab your gear and come with me. Time to see what you're made of." They walked across the base in relative silence. Williams pointed out the important locations: the mess hall, the medical facility, the communications center, and the armory. The base was larger than it had appeared from the transport vehicle, with multiple buildings and defensive positions scattered across several acres of desert. "So," Williams said as they approached the motor pool, "Johnson thinks you're fresh meat. Are you?" Maria considered her answer carefully. "I've served before, Sergeant." "Where?" "Afghanistan, Iraq, a few other places." Williams stopped walking and turned to face her directly. "A few other places? That's interesting. What was your last assignment?" "I'd rather not get into specifics if that's okay." "Fair enough. Everyone's got their reasons for keeping things close to the vest." He resumed walking. "But I need to know if you can handle yourself. My soldiers depend on each other, and I won't put them at risk for someone who can't pull their weight." They reached a group of armored vehicles parked in neat rows. Several soldiers were performing maintenance, checking engines, cleaning weapons, and inspecting equipment. Williams led her to a Humvee that had seen better days. "This is your ride," he said. "You'll be part of a 4-man team. Pete, and you met them already. Your job is to provide security for supply convoys running between here and the forward outposts. Not the most glamorous work, but it's important." Maria ran her hand along the vehicle's armor plating, knotting the patches where it had been repaired. "Has this vehicle seen action?" "More than most. The previous team." Williams paused, choosing his words carefully. "They had some bad luck. IED took out their regular driver. That's why we need you." "What happened to the team?" "They're alive, but shaken up. It's hard to lose someone you've been working with for months. They need someone they can trust to get them safely from point A to point B. That afternoon, Maria met with her new team for their first briefing. The mission seemed straightforward enough: escort a supply convoy to Outpost Delta, a smaller base about 50 kilometers north. The route was well established, but recent intelligence suggested increased insurgent activity in the area. The key, Williams explained, is to vary your timing and route when possible. Don't become predictable. These guys have been watching our patterns for weeks, looking for weaknesses. As Williams continued the briefing, Maria found herself analyzing every detail. The terrain, the potential ambush sites, the communication protocols, the contingency plans. Her teammates noticed her intense focus. "You okay?" Pete asked after Williams dismissed them. "You look like you're trying to memorize every word." "Just want to be prepared." "That's good," said, "but don't overthink it. Sometimes you just have to trust your instincts and react." The next morning came early. The convoy consisted of 6 vehicles, 2 Humvees, 3 supply trucks, and 1 additional escort vehicle. Maria's team was assigned to the lead escort position. As they prepared to depart, she noticed several of the other soldiers watching her with curiosity. Word had apparently spread that there was a new driver who looked barely old enough to have finished basic training. The first hour of the journey was uneventful. The desert landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by the occasional rock formation or dried riverbed. The radio crackled with routine communication between the vehicles, and Maria's teammates seemed relaxed despite the potential dangers. It was Pete who first noticed something wrong. "Hold up," he said, looking through his binoculars at a point about 2 kilometers ahead. "There's something on the road." Maria brought the vehicle to a halt and grabbed her own binoculars. What she saw made her blood run cold. It was barely visible, but there was a wire stretched across the road, partially hidden by sand and debris. "IED," she said quietly. "You sure?" asked. Maria studied the scene more carefully. The placement, the concealment, the surrounding terrain, it all fit a pattern she had seen many times before. "I'm sure." William's voice came over the radio from the rear escort vehicle. "Alpha Lead, what's your status?" "We have a possible IED across the road, about 2 clicks north of our position," Pete responded. "Can you confirm?" Maria took the radio. I can confirm it's an IED. There's also likely an ambush position at 10 o'clock from our current location behind those rocks." There was a long pause before Williams responded. "How can you be certain about the ambush position?" "The IED placement is designed to channel us toward that location. It's a classic setup." Another pause. "All units halt and maintain current positions. Alpha Lead, investigate the suspected ambush site." Maria maneuvered their vehicle off the main road, using the available cover to approach the rocky outcropping she had identified. Her teammates were quiet, watching her drive with growing amazement. Her movements were precise, efficient, and showed an understanding of tactical driving that went far beyond what they expected from someone they thought was inexperienced. As they got closer to the rocks, spotted something through his scope. "Movement. Looks like at least 3 individuals, possibly armed." "Can you get a clear shot?" Maria asked. "Negative, too much cover." Maria considered their options. The insurgents probably expected the convoy to either turn around or try to find an alternate route. They wouldn't expect a direct approach to their position. "I'm going to circle around behind them," she announced. "That's risky," Pete warned. "We don't know how many there are or what kind of weapons they have." "It's riskier to let them dictate the terms of engagement." Maria began a wide flanking maneuver, using the natural terrain to mask their movement. Her driving was smooth and confident, navigating obstacles and maintaining cover with skill that impressed her teammates. When they were in position behind the insurgent position, she brought the vehicle to a stop. "Pete, can you get eyes on them from here?" Both soldiers peered through their scopes and confirmed they had clear shots on 3 armed men positioned behind improvised fighting positions. "On my count," Maria said, 3, 2, 1. The engagement was brief but decisive. The insurgents, caught completely off guard by the flanking maneuver, were quickly neutralized. The convoy was able to proceed after the explosive device was safely disarmed by the EOD team called in from the base. As they continued toward their destination, Maria's teammates exchanged glances. Her performance had been nothing like what they expected from a rookie. Pete finally said, "Where exactly did you say you served before?" "I didn't," Maria replied, keeping her eyes on the road ahead. "Because that was some pretty advanced tactical thinking back there. Sometimes you just have to trust your instincts and react," she said, echoing's earlier words. When they reached Outpost Delta, news of their successful engagement had already preceded them. The base commander, a lieutenant colonel named Brooks, was waiting to debrief them personally. "I understand you identified both an IED and an ambush position before any of our other teams spotted them," he said to Maria. "That's impressive situational awareness for someone new to the area." "Thank you, sir. Where did you develop those skills?" Maria glanced at her teammates who were listening intently. "Experience, sir." Brooks studied her for a moment. There was something in her demeanor that suggested she was far more experienced than her file indicated, but he decided not to press the issue. "Well, whatever your background, good work today. Your team probably saved lives." That evening, as they prepared for the return journey, Williams pulled Maria aside. "I did some checking," he said quietly. "Your service record is mostly classified above my clearance level." Maria didn't respond. "That tells me you're not who you appear to be. That's fine. Everyone deserves a fresh start. But I need to know if there's anything else I should be aware of. My responsibility is to these soldiers and this mission." "There's nothing that will compromise the mission or put anyone in danger," Maria assured him. "Good, but next time you spot an ambush position with that level of certainty, maybe mention where you learned to do that." The return trip to Fob Thunder was without incident, but Maria could feel her teammates studying her throughout the journey. She knew it was only a matter of time before someone started asking more direct questions about her background. The problem was that the truth was far more complicated than anyone would believe. As they pulled into the motor pool that evening, Pete turned to her with a grin. "You know, for a rookie, you sure seem to know what you're doing." "Maybe I'm just a fast learner." "Maybe," said, "or maybe there's more to you than meets the eye." Maria began the post-mission equipment check, trying to ignore the speculative looks from her teammates. She had hoped to blend in, to serve quietly without drawing attention to herself. But her training and experience were hard to hide when lives were on the line. Later that night, as she lay in her bunk, Maria thought about the day's events. The successful mission felt good, but it also meant that her cover as an inexperienced soldier was beginning to crack. She wondered how long she could maintain the facade before someone discovered the truth about her past. Outside, the desert wind howled across the base, carrying with it the distant sound of helicopters returning from patrol. Another day in a war zone was ending, and tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, and new opportunities for her carefully constructed new identity to unravel. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind kept returning to the engagement earlier that day. The way she had analyzed the tactical situation, the confidence with which she had executed the flanking maneuver, the precision of her driving, it all came from years of experience that her teammates couldn't even imagine. The truth was that Maria wasn't a rookie at all. She was a decorated combat veteran with more combat experience than most soldiers twice her age. But that was a story for another day, and for now, she was content to let people believe whatever they wanted to believe about the quiet new soldier who seemed to have an unusual talent for staying alive in dangerous situations. Colonel Sarah Mitchell arrived at Fob Thunder on a gray morning when the desert wind carried the smell of distant fires. She came without fanfare, carrying only a small duffel bag and a briefcase that never left her side. Most of the soldiers on the base assumed she was conducting a routine inspection or investigation into base operations. They had no idea that her real purpose was to find answers about one particular soldier. Maria was in the motor pool, performing maintenance on her team's Humvee, when Williams approached her with an unusual expression on his face. "You're wanted in the command bunker, immediately." "What's this about, Sergeant?" "Above my pay grade. Just grab your gear and report to Colonel Mitchell in Conference Room A." Maria's stomach tightened. She had been dreading this moment for weeks. Someone had finally decided to dig deeper into her background, and now she would have to face the consequences of her deception. Conference Room A was a small, windowless space typically used for classified briefings. Colonel Mitchell was seated at the far end of a metal table, with Maria's service folder spread out in front of her. She was a woman in her early 50s, with gray-streaked hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to analyze everything they saw. "Sit down, Sergeant," Mitchell said without looking up from the files. Maria took a seat across from her and waited. "Do you know why I'm here?" Mitchell asked, finally making eye contact. "No, ma'am. I'm here because your recent performance has raised some interesting questions. Questions that your service record doesn't seem to answer adequately." Mitchell opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "According to your file, you completed basic training 18 months ago, followed by advanced individual training in vehicle operations. Your previous deployment was a short-term assignment to a logistics unit in Kuwait. Nothing in your record suggests the kind of tactical expertise you've been demonstrating." Maria remained silent. "However," Mitchell continued, "there are several interesting gaps in your record. Periods of time that are classified above normal levels, training assignments that don't appear in any standard databases, and commendations that have been redacted." "Ma'am, I'm not sure what you're looking for." "I'm looking for the truth," Mitchell leaned forward. "Because either you're the most naturally gifted soldier I've ever encountered, or you're someone completely different from who you claim to be." The colonel reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick file marked with multiple classification stamps. "This is your real service record, Sergeant, the one that requires a top-secret clearance to access." Maria felt her carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble. "Maria," Mitchell read from the file, "age 28, not 25 as stated in your current assignment papers. Graduated from West Point with honors 7 years ago. Completed Ranger School, Special Forces training, and multiple specialized courses in reconnaissance and counterinsurgency operations." The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning. 5 combat deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Somalia, and 1 classified location. Decorated for valor on multiple occasions, including— Mitchell turned several pages. 5 Purple Hearts for wounds received in combat operations. Maria's secret was finally out. "The question," Mitchell continued, "is why someone with your background and experience is serving under false pretenses as a junior enlisted soldier at a forward operating base." "Ma'am, Before you answer, let me tell you what I've pieced together from your recent performance here. You've successfully identified and neutralized 3 separate ambush attempts, conducted reconnaissance operations with skill that impressed special operations veterans, and demonstrated tactical leadership that has made you an informal leader among soldiers who significantly outrank you." Mitchell closed the file and leaned back in her chair. "Now, are you going to tell me what's really going on, or do I need to keep guessing?" Maria took a deep breath. The truth was more complicated than Colonel Mitchell could possibly imagine, but she realized that continuing to lie would only make things worse. "Colonel, the person in that file, she doesn't exist anymore." "Explain." 2 years ago, I was part of a classified operation that went badly wrong, very badly wrong. People died because of decisions I made, and Maria paused, choosing her words carefully. "I needed to start over." "Start over how?" "I requested a transfer to a new unit under a modified identity. The Army agreed because the alternative was losing me entirely." Mitchell nodded slowly. "PTSD. Among other things. And you thought serving as a junior enlisted soldier would be therapeutic." "I thought serving without the burden of rank and expectations might help me remember why I became a soldier in the first place." Mitchell pulled out another document from her briefcase. "I've read the classified report about your last mission, Sergeant. What happened wasn't your fault." "That's not how I remember it." "Memory can be unreliable when trauma is involved." Mitchell's voice softened slightly. "But what I'm seeing here at Fob Thunder suggests that you've retained all of your skills and tactical expertise. You haven't lost your edge. If anything, you seem sharper than ever." "Maybe, but I'm not sure I trust myself with command responsibility anymore." Mitchell considered this for several minutes. Outside, they could hear the routine sounds of base operations, vehicles moving, soldiers calling to each other, helicopters landing and taking off. "Here's my dilemma," she finally said. "I have a decorated combat veteran with exceptional skills serving under false pretenses. That creates legal and administrative problems that I need to resolve." I understand, ma'am. But I also have a soldier who has proven invaluable to the mission here and has probably saved lives through her expertise. That creates operational considerations that I can't ignore. Maria waited for Mitchell to continue. So I'm going to offer you a choice. Option 1, we restore your true identity and rank, and you accept a leadership position commensurate with your experience and abilities. Option 2, we find a way to legitimize your current status while allowing you to continue serving in your current role. What would option 2 involve? Officially, you would be designated as a liaison officer conducting an assessment of frontline operations. Unofficially, you would continue doing exactly what you've been doing. Maria thought about the offer. Both options had advantages and disadvantages, but one thing was clear: her time as an anonymous junior soldier was ending. Ma'am, can I ask why you're giving me a choice, instead of simply ordering me to resume my previous rank? Mitchell smiled slightly. Because in my experience, good soldiers perform best when they have some control over their circumstances. And because I think your instincts about what you need might be more accurate than what headquarters thinks you need. I appreciate that, Colonel. There is one condition, regardless of which option you choose. Yes, ma'am. You stop pretending to be inexperienced. Your teammates and commanders need to know they can rely on your expertise. Half measures and false modesty could get people killed. Before Maria could respond, Williams appeared in the doorway. Colonel, we have an urgent situation developing. Intelligence reports indicate a major attack being planned against Outpost Delta. All available teams are being mobilized for a preemptive strike. Mitchell looked at Maria. It appears that your decision will have to wait. How quickly can you be ready to deploy? 5 minutes, ma'am. Good, Sergeant Williams, I want designated as tactical advisor for this operation. Her expertise will be invaluable. As they left the conference room, Williams gave Maria a knowing look. I guess we're about to find out what you're really capable of. The briefing for the emergency operation was held in the main command center, with representatives from all units on the base. Intelligence had intercepted communications indicating that insurgent forces were planning a coordinated attack on multiple outposts, with Outpost Delta being the primary target. Colonel Mitchell took charge of the briefing, but she frequently deferred to Maria for tactical analysis and recommendations. For the first time since arriving at Fob Thunder, Maria didn't try to hide her expertise or downplay her recommendations. The intelligence suggests a 3-phase attack, she explained, pointing to the situation map. First, they'll attempt to disable communications and cut off reinforcement routes. Second, they'll conduct diversionary attacks against secondary targets. Third, they'll concentrate their forces against Delta's weakest defensive positions. How can you be certain of their strategy? Asked Lieutenant Hayes. Because it's exactly what I would do if I were planning this attack, Maria replied without hesitation. The room fell silent. This was the first time she had spoken with such confidence and authority, and everyone present could hear the difference in her voice. The key to stopping them, she continued, is to disrupt the first phase before they can implement the second and third phases. If we can maintain communications and keep the reinforcement routes open, they'll be forced to commit their forces prematurely. Colonel Mitchell nodded approvingly. What do you recommend? Maria studied the map for several minutes, considering multiple factors including terrain, known insurgent capabilities, available friendly forces, and probable enemy courses of action. A 4-pronged approach, she finally said. First, establish a communications relay team at this elevated position to maintain contact with Delta even if their primary systems are compromised. Second, position blocking forces along these 3 routes to prevent the insurgents from cutting off reinforcements. Third, deploy rapid reaction teams here and here to respond to the diversionary attacks. Fourth, reinforce Delta's perimeter with additional forces positioned to counter the main assault. That's a lot of moving parts, Williams observed. Yes, but it's the only way to counter their strategy effectively. If we just hunker down and wait for them to attack, we'll be fighting on their terms. Mitchell looked around the room. Any objections to Sergeant's plan? No one spoke. Then we implement it immediately. All team leaders coordinate with for specific assignments and timing. As the various commanders gathered around Maria to discuss their roles in the operation, Pete approached Williams. Sarge, who exactly is? Because that wasn't the analysis of a junior enlisted soldier. Williams considered his response carefully. Pete, sometimes you meet people who are much more than they appear to be, is one of those people. The operation launched 2 hours later, with teams deploying to their assigned positions across a wide area of desert terrain. Maria found herself in the unusual position of coordinating multiple units, while technically being the lowest-ranking soldier involved in the command structure. But rank seemed irrelevant as reports began coming in from the field teams. Her predictions about insurgent movements were proving accurate, and her tactical recommendations were allowing friendly forces to stay ahead of enemy actions. "This is Delta Base," came a call over the radio. "We have movement consistent with your projections at Sectors 7 and 9. "Copy that, Delta. Reaction Team Alpha should be in position to intercept at Sector 7. Reaction Team Bravo, adjust your position to cover Sector 9. "Alpha Team in position and engaging hostile forces at Sector 7, came the immediate response. "Bravo Team moving to intercept at Sector 9. As the night progressed, the battle developed exactly as Maria had predicted. The insurgents' attempts to cut communications were thwarted by the relay team, their diversionary attacks were quickly contained by the reaction teams, and their main assault was met by reinforced defensive positions that were prepared and waiting. By dawn, the threat to Outpost Delta had been eliminated with minimal casualties on the friendly side. The operation was hailed as a complete success, and Maria's tactical planning was credited with preventing what could have been a significant defeat. Colonel Mitchell found her in the command center as the last reports were being filed. "Impressive work, Sergeant. I think it's time for you to make a decision about your future." Maria looked around the room at the soldiers she had been serving with for the past month. They were looking at her differently now, with the kind of respect and trust that she hadn't experienced in 2 years. "I think I already have, ma'am. And I'd like to continue serving in my current role, but with my true identity and capabilities acknowledged. These soldiers deserve to know who they're working with." Mitchell nodded approvingly. "I think that's the right choice. Are you ready to tell them the truth about who you really are?" Maria thought about the 5 purple hearts she had never mentioned, the commendations she had never displayed, and the combat experiences she had never discussed. "Yes, ma'am, I think it's time." The morning after the successful defense of Outpost Delta, Maria stood outside the barracks at Fob Thunder, watching the sunrise paint the desert horizon in shades of gold and orange. She had barely slept, knowing that today would be the day she finally revealed the truth about her identity to the soldiers who had become her friends and teammates. Colonel Mitchell had given her permission to handle the revelation in her own way, understanding that trust, once broken, would be difficult to rebuild. But Maria knew that continuing to serve alongside these soldiers while maintaining her deception would be impossible after her performance during the tactical operation. Williams found her there an hour later, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Figured you might need this," he said, offering her one of the cups. "Thanks, Sergeant." They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes before Williams spoke again. "Mitchell briefed me on your real background last night. 5 Purple Hearts, that's not something you see very often." "No, it's not. Want to talk about how you earned them?" Maria considered the question. For 2 years, she had avoided discussing her combat experiences with anyone except military counselors and medical personnel. But something about Williams' genuine concern made her want to try. "The first one was in Afghanistan about 6 years ago. Roadside bomb during a patrol. Nothing too dramatic, just shrapnel in the leg and arm. I was back on duty within a week." "And the others?" "Iraq 2 years later. Sniper fire during an urban operation. Bullet grazed my skull 1/4 inch to the left, and we wouldn't be having this conversation." Williams nodded, understanding that she was sharing something significant. "The third was in Syria, classified operation. Rocket-propelled grenade hit our position during a reconnaissance mission. I took shrapnel in the back and shoulder, but managed to call in the extraction for my team." "How many team members?" "4, they all made it out." "That's good work." Maria smiled slightly. "The 4th one was in Somalia, mortar attack on our forward operating base. I was in the communications bunker when a shell landed nearby. perforated eardrum, and more shrapnel, but the important thing was maintaining communications with our air support. Williams waited for her to continue. The fifth one, Maria paused, her expression becoming more serious. That was the mission that ended my previous career. You don't have to. No, it's okay. I think I need to tell someone. Maria took a deep breath. Classified location, classified mission. All I can say is that we were trying to rescue hostages held by a terrorist organization. Intelligence was wrong about enemy strength and positions. What happened? We walked into a trap. 3 of my team members were killed, and I took a bullet in the chest that missed my heart by about an inch. But the worst part was that I was the team leader. I made the decisions that led us into that situation. Williams nodded slowly. And that's why you requested the identity change. I couldn't handle the responsibility anymore. Every time someone looked to me for leadership, I saw the faces of the soldiers who died because of my mistakes. But that's not what happened here. Your leadership saved lives during the Delta operation. I know, and that's what's been confusing me for the past month. Working with you and Pete, and it's reminded me why I became a soldier in the first place. Williams finished his coffee and looked at his watch. Alpha Company assembles for morning briefing in 20 minutes. That would be a good time to tell them who you really are. Any advice on how to handle it? Just tell them the truth. They've seen your capabilities, so they're not going to be completely surprised. But they deserve to know who they've been serving with. An hour later, Alpha Company was assembled in the briefing room. The soldiers filled the available chairs and lined the walls, all wondering why they had been called to an unscheduled meeting. Williams stood at the front of the room, with Maria seated in the front row. Good morning, Williams began. We're here because one of our team members has something important to share with you. Maria stood and moved to the front of the room, feeling the eyes of dozens of soldiers focused on her. These were people she had served with, laughed with, and shared dangers with over the past month. They deserved honesty. Some of you have been asking questions about my background, she began. About how I seem to know things that don't match my service record, and why my tactical analysis has been more accurate than you might expect from someone new to combat operations. Murmurs rippled through the room. The truth is, I haven't been entirely honest with you about who I am. Pete raised his hand. Are you going to tell us you're actually CIA or something? Maria smiled. No, nothing like that. My name really is Maria, and I really am a sergeant in the United States Army, but I'm not the inexperienced soldier you thought I was. She looked around the room, making eye contact with as many soldiers as possible. I've been deployed to combat zones continuously for the past 6 years. I've served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Somalia, and several classified locations. I'm a graduate of Ranger School and have completed specialized training in reconnaissance, counterinsurgency, and small unit tactics. The room was completely silent now. I've been awarded 5 Purple Hearts for wounds received in combat operations, along with several other decorations for actions under fire. Spoke from the back of the room. Why didn't you tell us this before? Because 2 years ago, I made mistakes that cost soldiers their lives. I requested a transfer to a new unit under a modified identity because I needed to figure out whether I could still be an effective soldier without the burden of command responsibility. And what did you figure out? Asked. Maria looked at her immediate teammates, Pete and Williams. These were the people who had trusted her with their lives during multiple dangerous missions. I figured out that you can't hide from who you really are. And more importantly, I figured out that serving alongside soldiers like you reminds me why I became an officer in the first place. Lieutenant Hayes, who had been standing near the door, stepped forward. What exactly was your rank before you came here? Captain, Maria replied. I was a captain. The revelation sent a wave of surprise through the room. They had been serving alongside an officer who had been pretending to be an enlisted soldier. So what happens now? Someone called out. Now I continue serving with Alpha Company, but without pretending to be someone I'm not. My rank will be restored, but my assignment here will continue for the remainder of the deployment. Williams stepped forward. Any questions for Captain? Pete raised his hand. Just one. All those times you saved our asses on missions, was that just luck, or were you using your experience to keep us safe? Definitely the experience. and I'd do it again without hesitation. Grinned, it makes sense now. I kept wondering how someone so small could drive like a professional tactical operator. Hey, Maria protested with mock indignation. I prefer vertically challenged. The tension in the room began to dissolve as soldiers realized that Maria was still the same person they had been serving with, regardless of her background. Approached her after the meeting ended. Captain, I have to ask, what was it like, serving in all those different places? Challenging, educational, sometimes terrifying. Maria considered how much to share. But also rewarding in ways I never expected. Every deployment taught me something new about leadership, about courage, and about the incredible things ordinary people can do when they're part of something bigger than themselves. Is that why you kept serving, even after being wounded so many times? Partly, but mostly it's because of people like you and Pete and soldiers who do their jobs with professionalism and courage, even when they're tired, scared, or far from home. Over the following days, Maria's revelation created a significant shift in the dynamics at Fob Thunder. Word spread quickly through the base that Alpha Company had been serving alongside a decorated combat veteran who had chosen to serve as an enlisted soldier. Rather than resentment or suspicion, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Other soldiers began approaching her for advice on tactical situations, leadership challenges, and career decisions. Officers who had previously ignored her now sought her input on operational planning. The informal influence she had developed through her performance was now matched with formal recognition of her experience and expertise. But the most significant change was in her relationship with her immediate teammates. Pete, and had always respected her abilities, but now they understood the full context of her knowledge and skills. Pete said one evening as they were cleaning their weapons after a patrol, it explains why you always seem to know exactly what to do in dangerous situations. Experience is a good teacher, Maria replied. But it's more than that, added. You have this way of staying calm and thinking clearly when everything is falling apart. That doesn't just come from experience. That comes from being tested and proving that you can handle whatever gets thrown at you. Nodded in agreement. I feel safer knowing you're watching out for us, not because of your rank, but because of who you are. Williams, who had been listening to the conversation, spoke up. That's the highest compliment a soldier can receive, knowing that your teammates trust you to bring them home safely. As the weeks passed, Maria found herself settling into her new role as both a captain and a member of Alpha Company. The pretense was gone, replaced by honest relationships based on mutual respect and shared experiences. She still drove the same Humvee, still went on the same missions, and still worked alongside the same soldiers. But now she did so as herself, without the burden of maintaining a false identity or hiding her capabilities. One evening, as she was reviewing intelligence reports for the next day's mission, Williams knocked on her door. Captain, do you have a minute? Of course, Sergeant. What's on your mind? I wanted to thank you for trusting us with the truth about your background. I should thank you for creating an environment where I felt safe enough to be honest. Williams smiled. Fair enough, but I also wanted to ask you something. Do you think you found what you were looking for when you came here? Maria considered the question. When she had first arrived at Fob Thunder, she had been running from her past mistakes and questioning her ability to serve effectively. Now, surrounded by soldiers who trusted and respected her, she felt more like herself than she had in 2 years. Yes, she said finally. I think I have. I've remembered that leadership isn't about being perfect or never making mistakes. It's about caring enough about your people to do everything in your power to protect them and help them succeed. And the mistakes you made before. They'll always be part of my story, but they don't have to define my future. Williams nodded approvingly. That sounds like the perspective of someone who's ready to be a leader again. I think I am, thanks to you and the rest of Alpha Company. As Williams left, Maria returned to her mission planning with renewed focus and confidence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to serve alongside the soldiers who had helped her rediscover her purpose and identity. She had come to Fob Thunder carrying the weight of past failures and present doubts. She was leaving those burdens behind and embracing the truth about who she really was, a combat veteran, a leader, and a soldier committed to protecting those who served beside her. 3 months after revealing her true identity, Captain Maria had become an integral part of Fob Thunder's command structure. Colonel Mitchell had officially designated her as the base's tactical operations advisor, a position that allowed her to continue working closely with Alpha Company while contributing to broader operational planning. The transformation in her role had been remarkable. What had begun as an attempt to serve anonymously had evolved into a leadership position that utilized all of her experience and skills. More importantly, she had regained confidence in her ability to make critical decisions under pressure. The morning that would prove to be the most significant of her deployment began like any other. Intelligence reports indicated routine insurgent activity in the region, and several standard patrol and convoy operations were scheduled. Maria was reviewing the overnight surveillance reports when Williams approached her desk with an expression of concern. "Captain, we've got a situation developing. Outpost Alpha is reporting that their supply convoy is overdue by 4 hours. Route and last known position. They were taking the northern approach through the canyon passes. Last radio contact was at checkpoint 7. Maria immediately understood the implications. The northern route was notoriously dangerous, with multiple choke points that were ideal for ambush operations. A convoy that was 4 hours overdue in that terrain was almost certainly in serious trouble. "What assets do we have available for search and rescue?" she asked. "2 helicopter crews are grounded for maintenance. We have ground teams available, but response time to checkpoint 7 would be at least 2 hours. Too long. If they're under attack or trapped, every minute counts." Williams nodded grimly. "Colonel Mitchell wants to see you in the command center immediately." The command center was buzzing with activity when Maria arrived. Multiple radio operators were attempting to reestablish contact with the missing convoy, while intelligence analysts were reviewing satellite imagery of the suspected area. "Captain," Mitchell called out as she entered, "I need your assessment of the situation." Maria quickly reviewed the available information: convoy composition, planned route, last known position, and current weather conditions. The picture that emerged was troubling. Based on their last known position and the time that's elapsed, they're either immobilized by mechanical problems or under attack. Given the terrain and known insurgent activity in that area, I suspect the latter. Immediate deployment of a search and rescue operation with sufficient force to handle both extraction and combat operations. The terrain limits our options, but there are 3 possible approach routes. Mitchell nodded. "I want you to lead the operation." "Ma'am, you know that terrain better than anyone else on this base, and your tactical expertise gives us the best chance of bringing everyone home safely." Maria felt a familiar sensation, the combination of responsibility and pressure that had once caused her to doubt herself. But instead of the fear and uncertainty she had experienced 2 years ago, she felt focused and determined. "Yes, ma'am. I'll need Alpha Company plus additional personnel for a total force of about 20 soldiers. 2 vehicles for the rescue team plus supporting elements." "You have whatever you need. How quickly can you deploy?" 30 minutes. As Maria left the command center to organize the rescue operation, she thought about how much had changed since her arrival at Fob Thunder. 6 months ago, the prospect of leading a high-risk mission would have filled her with doubt and anxiety. Now, she felt ready to do whatever was necessary to bring the missing soldiers home. Williams was waiting for her in the motor pool, along with Pete, and her original teammates had volunteered immediately when they learned about the mission. "Just like old times," Pete said with a grin that didn't quite hide his concern about the dangerous mission ahead. "Better than old times," Maria replied. "Now you know who you're working with." The rescue team assembled quickly. In addition to Alpha Company's core members, Maria had requested several additional soldiers with specialized skills: a medic, a communications specialist, and 2 soldiers with explosive ordnance disposal training. As they prepared to depart, Maria gathered the team for a final briefing. "Intelligence suggests the missing convoy is somewhere in this area," she said, pointing to a section of the terrain map. 3 vehicles, 12 personnel total. They could be anywhere within a 5-kilometer radius of their last known position." "What kind of opposition are we expecting?" asked Staff Sergeant Johnson, the team medic. "Unknown, but we have to assume significant insurgent presence. The northern route has been a favorite target recently, and the fact that the convoy has been out of contact for 4 hours suggests they ran into serious trouble. Maria looked around at the faces of the soldiers who would be depending on her leadership for the next several hours. These were experienced, professional soldiers who trusted her judgment and abilities. Our primary mission is to locate and extract the missing personnel. Secondary mission is to gather intelligence about insurgent activities in the area. We go in fast, find our people, and get everyone out safely. Rules of engagement, asked Corporal Davies, the communications specialist. Standard row, but remember that we're likely dealing with American hostages if the convoy was captured rather than destroyed. Positive identification is essential before engaging any targets. The convoy of rescue vehicles departed Fob Thunder 45 minutes after the initial briefing. Maria rode in the lead vehicle with Williams, Pete, and, while coordinated with the other vehicles from the second Humvee. As they approached the area where the supply convoy had last been seen, Maria felt her senses becoming. Every shadow, every rock formation, every variation in the terrain could potentially hide either friendly forces or hostile positions. Movement 2 o'clock, reported from his position as gunner. Maria immediately brought the vehicle to a halt and grabbed her binoculars. What she saw through the lenses made her heart race. 3 military vehicles positioned in a defensive formation about a kilometer away, with signs of a recent firefight evident in the surrounding area. "I see the convoy," she reported over the radio. 3 vehicles in defensive positions, no visible movement, but there are signs of combat. "Any signs of hostile forces?" Williams asked. Maria continued scanning the area methodically. Something felt wrong about the scene. The vehicles were positioned correctly for defense, but there was no sign of the soldiers who should have been manning them. Negative on hostile forces, but also negative on friendly forces. The vehicles appear to be abandoned. "Could be a trap," Pete observed. "Agreed, we approach carefully and assume the worst." Maria coordinated the approach with military precision. One team would advance directly toward the convoy vehicles, while the other team provided overwatch from elevated positions. Communications would be maintained at all times, and any sign of hostile activity would result in immediate withdrawal. As they got closer to the abandoned convoy, the evidence of a significant firefight became more apparent. Bullet holes in the vehicle armor, spent brass casings scattered on the ground, and damaged equipment suggested that the missing soldiers had fought hard before being overwhelmed. "Captain," called specialist from the Overwatch team, "I've got something. There are tracks leading away from the convoy position toward those hills." Maria studied the terrain indicated. It was perfect hiding terrain, caves, rock formations, and multiple defensive positions that would be ideal for holding hostages. "How many sets of tracks?" "Hard to tell exactly, but it looks like at least 15 to 20 people. Some of the boot prints look like military issue." "So they're probably alive and being held in those hills," Williams concluded. "That's my assessment. The question is how to get them out without getting them killed in the process." Maria called for a tactical pause while she analyzed the situation. A direct assault on the suspected hostage location would likely result in casualties among both the rescuers and the hostages. But waiting for additional support would give the insurgents more time to move their prisoners or eliminate them entirely. "I'm going to recommend a 2-phase operation," she finally announced. "Phase 1 involves reconnaissance to determine exact hostage location and enemy strength. Phase 2 is a coordinated rescue assault." "That could take hours we don't have," Williams pointed out. "Maybe, but it's the best chance we have of getting everyone out alive." The reconnaissance phase began immediately. Maria approached the suspected hostage location using stealth techniques that allowed them to get within 200 meters without being detected. What they discovered confirmed both their hopes and their fears. The 12 missing soldiers were being held in a natural cave formation, guarded by approximately 20 insurgents armed with automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades. The hostages appeared to be uninjured, but were clearly being prepared for movement to another location. "We've got a small window of opportunity," Maria whispered into her radio. "They're getting ready to move the hostages, probably within the next hour." "Can you get a clear count on hostile forces?" 20 confirmed, possibly more inside the caves. They're well-positioned and heavily armed. Recommendations. Maria studied the tactical situation carefully. The insurgents had chosen their position well, good defensive terrain, multiple escape routes, and clear fields of fire in all directions. A conventional assault would likely result in heavy casualties. But she had an idea that was risky but might work. "I need you to bring both teams to my position," she said, "and I need the EOD specialists to prepare some very specific charges." 30 minutes later, Maria's entire rescue force was positioned around the insurgent stronghold. Her plan was complex, but based on sound tactical principles. Create multiple simultaneous distractions while inserting a small team directly into the hostage location. "On my mark," she said over the radio, "Alpha team will create a diversion from the north. Bravo team will engage from the east. Charlie team will use the confusion to approach the cave entrance directly." "What about you?" Williams asked. "I'll be leading Charlie team." The operation launched with precision timing. As the diversion teams opened fire from their positions, drawing the attention and fire of most of the insurgent guards, Maria led 3 soldiers directly toward the cave where the hostages were being held. The approach required every skill she had learned in 6 years of combat operations. Moving from cover to cover while under fire, coordinating with supporting teams, and maintaining focus on the primary mission objective while chaos erupted around them. When they reached the cave entrance, Maria found herself face to face with 2 insurgent guards who were more surprised to see her than she was to see them. The engagement was brief and decisive. Inside the cave, she found the 12 missing soldiers tied but unharmed. As her team began cutting their restraints, she coordinated the extraction with the supporting teams. "All hostages secured and ready for extraction," she reported over the radio. "Copy that. Can you move them to the extraction point?" "Affirmative, moving now." The extraction of the rescued soldiers required the same level of tactical precision as their rescue. Moving 15 people across dangerous terrain while under fire was one of the most challenging operations Maria had ever attempted. But her experience, training, and leadership proved equal to the task. Every member of the rescue force understood their role, trusted her judgment, and executed their assignments with professional competence. 2 hours after the operation began, all personnel were safely back at Fob Thunder. The missing convoy soldiers were reunited with their units. The rescue team was debriefed on their successful operation, and Maria found herself once again being praised for tactical excellence under pressure. Colonel Mitchell called her to the command center that evening for a private conversation. "Outstanding work today, Captain. That was textbook leadership under the most challenging circumstances." "Thank you, ma'am. The success belonged to everyone who participated in the operation." "That's exactly the kind of response I would expect from an effective leader. But I want to ask you something. How did it feel to be in command of a high-risk operation again?" Maria considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, the prospect of being responsible for other soldiers' lives in combat would have terrified her. Today, it had felt natural and appropriate. "It felt right," she said finally, "like I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing." "Any doubts or second thoughts about your decisions?" "No, ma'am. I made the best decisions I could with the available information, and the results speak for themselves." Mitchell nodded approvingly. "That's the attitude of someone who has successfully worked through their previous trauma and is ready for greater responsibilities." "What do you mean?" "I mean that your deployment here is about to end, and I've been asked to provide recommendations for your next assignment. How do you feel about returning to a command position?" Maria thought about her teammates in Alpha Company, the soldiers she had served with and led over the past 6 months. They had helped her rediscover her confidence and purpose as a leader. But she also realized that her time at Fob Thunder had been a transitional phase rather than a permanent situation. "I think I'm ready, ma'am, thanks to the soldiers I've served with here." "Good, because the Army needs leaders like you, especially leaders who understand what it means to serve alongside the soldiers they're responsible for." As Maria left Mitchell's office, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had arrived at Fob Thunder carrying the weight of past failures and present doubts. She was leaving with renewed confidence in her abilities and a clear understanding of her responsibility as a leader. The next morning, she found Williams and her teammates in the motor pool, performing routine maintenance on their vehicles. "So," Pete said without looking up from the engine he was working on, "word is that you're being reassigned to a command position." "That's right. How did you hear about that?" "Nothing stays secret on a base this size," replied with a grin. "The question is, are you ready to go back to being a full-time officer instead of just one of us?" Maria looked at the soldiers who had become her friends and trusted teammates over the past months. They had accepted her despite her deception, respected her despite her past mistakes, and helped her remember who she really was as a soldier and leader. "I'm ready," she said, "but I'll never forget what I learned serving alongside all of you." "And what was that?" asked. "That leadership isn't about rank or position. It's about caring enough about your people to do whatever it takes to bring them home safely." Williams nodded approvingly. "That's a lesson that will serve you well wherever you go next." 2 weeks later, Captain Maria departed Fob Thunder for her new assignment as a company commander at a training facility in the United States. As her transport aircraft lifted off from the desert base, she looked down at the place where she had rediscovered her purpose and identity as a soldier. She carried with her the lessons learned from 6 months of serving alongside some of the finest soldiers she had ever known. More importantly, she carried the confidence that came from facing her fears and proving to herself that she could still be an effective leader. The small box containing her 5 Purple Hearts was packed safely in her duffel bag, along with the memories of the courage and sacrifice they represented. But she was no longer defined by those past wounds or the mistakes that had followed them. She was defined by her commitment to the soldiers she would lead, the missions she would accomplish, and the continued service to the country and principles she had sworn to defend. The rookie facade was gone forever, replaced by the truth of who she really was, a combat veteran, a proven leader, and a soldier who understood that the greatest honor was earning the trust and respect of those who served beside her.